Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man, and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. Welcome back to our Christmas project, How the Devil Tried to Steal Christmas. This video is part of a playlist, a series of short videos dealing with the oddities, the setbacks, the mishaps, and the darker details contained within the Christmas story. This is episode 4, dealing with Mary and the supposed adultery and ramifications. I'm your host, Jorge Anito. Most of us are familiar with these opening lines from Matthew. It's in chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. And so, we want to focus on Joseph and Mary prior to the Christ child. And this is what we see is the virginity of Mary compromised. And, we're going to look at some of these laws that deal with the ramifications. Now, the text informs us that they were betrothed to one another. Betrothal in biblical times was a formal contract between two families, and it would discuss the particulars of the marital agreement, very similar and yet very different to what we would call engagement here in our modern day. And so the difference, however, with engagement, is the guy would typically ask the girl, will you marry me? And they enter into a season of just getting to know each other and whatnot. And then on down the road, they would get married. And so betrothal is more of a, like I said, a formal contract. Both parties are legally bound. And so if it is broken, if the betrothal agreement is broken, then there are things that need to be carried out. A divorce, a certificate of divorce is granted, and then severe consequences ensue upon the offending party. More on that in just a moment. But the betrothal period, similar to the engagement period, is a time, the time from the initial agreement until the time of the actual marriage, the wedding. And it generally lasts about a year, but it's a time where it gives the groom time to prepare their house. It also gives them time as well to get to know one another. A lot of times, in most cases, marriage agreements were worked out by the families, and so it was a prearranged sort of thing. And this isn't every case, but it was a custom back in that day to have arranged marriages. And so just the betrothal time, the period in which they were engaged to one another, gave them time to get to know each other, give the groom time to prepare for the wedding, get everything he needs to handle that. And then it gives the bride time to make preparations and whatnot. And so, after the betrothal period, 3 things would then follow. One would be the actual wedding ceremony. 2, it would be the bride's move into the groom's home. And then 3, would be the consummation of the marriage. And so, going back to the consequences, the ramifications wrought upon the offending party, especially in the case of infidelity or adultery, this would be a direct violation of the betrothal contract. And there are specific Old Testament laws dealing with adultery, and we'll just look briefly at Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 10. And it says this: if a man or a woman commits adultery on the other, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them will surely be put to death, and their blood is upon them. There's a lot of weird euphemisms in the Old Testament that sort of just go over our head, and I'll just quickly address this. To uncover someone's nakedness. Like, for instance, what that means is, if I was to uncover my neighbor's nakedness, that's a euphemism for me sleeping with his wife. That's what this whole uncovering nakedness phraseology means. And so, but more specifically, we're talking about betrothed, people who are betrothed to one another. While this focuses mainly on, people who are already married and committing adultery, on one another, there are specific laws fine-tuned into, the betrothal parties. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 23 through 27, this is what some of these laws are. It says, if there is a betrothed virgin, and a man meets her in the city, and he lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death with stones. The young woman, because she did not cry out for help, though she was in the city, and the man, because he violated his neighbor's wife. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. But if in the open country a man meets a young woman who is betrothed, and the man seizes her, and he lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. And you shall do nothing to the young woman. She has committed no offense punishable by death. For this case is like that of a man attacking and murdering his wife, or murdering his neighbor, because he met her in the open country. And though the betrothed young woman cried for help, there was no one to rescue her. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed, and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give to the father of the young woman 50 shekels, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her, and he may not divorce her all his days. And these are just some of the rape laws, some of the sex laws, and some of the betrothal violation laws that you'll see in the Old Testament. And remember, in the beginning of the Christmas account of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 18 and 19, let's just reread that. And it says, the birth of Jesus took place just like this. When the mother Mary had been betrothed or engaged to Joseph, before they had come together, that is, before they had actually got married and consummated the marriage, before they had sexual relations, she was already found to be pregnant. She was found to be pregnant by the Holy Spirit. But now this is what it says. And her husband Joseph, he was a just man, and he wasn't willing to put her to shame, and so he resolved to divorce her quietly. This was a culture which is what we would call, scholars refer to as shame and honor culture. And you see this nowadays too. It hasn't really left very much, more prevalent so in other countries. But you have a family house, and if the black sheep of this family, does something, to shame them, then it brings shame upon the house. And so maybe they commit a crime of some sort, and so they are looked down upon. Not only the person who offended, but the whole family is frowned upon, because this criminal, this violator, has come from this family line. And so they was huge on honor, the family name being an honorable thing, and being above reproach. And if shame was brought upon the house, they would deal with it the best way they could, but it was frowned upon, very much so. And so Joseph sees that Mary, the one he's engaged to, is starting to gain a little weight one day. And he says, I know nothing has happened yet, but yet you're still pregnant. Now, Joseph isn't stupid, and he knows what the laws are for this. She could be stoned. She could be dragged out to the city gate, made a public spectacle in front of everybody, and stoned, to death. And it would have been disgraceful for her, but disgraceful for the family, and it would have been just a big deal. And so he says, you know what, I don't want to subject her to that, and especially not her nor the family, and so I just want to divorce her quietly. And so, like I was saying, you would have to divorce someone if you were betrothed to them, and again if you were married to them. So you could divorce a person, two different ways during the engagement or the betrothal process. But if they made it through that and everything worked out and they get married and on down the road things didn't work out, adultery was committed, whatever, then you could divorce them over this way too. And so it's just the way the laws worked in biblical times. But the good thing is that Luke records for us what actually happens, and he says that the angel of the Lord one day appeared to Mary and said that she would give birth to Jesus, the Son of God. She says, but I am a virgin. And the angel says, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, will overshadow you, and you will conceive the Son of God. And so maybe she had told this to Joseph, and, this is a case where this has never happened before, but what we have seen before is unfaithfulness and infidelity. And so he was unwilling to deal with it, and he had already set in his mind to just divorce her quietly and just be done with it and just move on. Another good thing is later on, the angel of the Lord, Gabriel, did appear to Joseph in a dream, and he went ahead and let him know that, what is conceived in her, or what the child that is in her is conceived by the Holy Spirit. And so he reassured Joseph and said that Mary has been faithful all along. It doesn't look that way, obviously, but she has. So there's no need to go forward in carrying out these plans of divorce like you have. And so we all know that things eventually work out for the young couple, and then Jesus was born to them. This doesn't mean that the problem stops, later on. Later on in Jesus' life, we see in John chapter 8, verse 41, Jesus is in sort of a little bout with the Pharisees, and he's talking to them about the truth setting them free, and they're kind of going back and forth, and they answered Jesus, and they said to him, hey, Abraham is our father, meaning they are descended from Abraham. And Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing what Abraham did. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. You are doing what your father did. And this is what they say, and this is what I wanted to point out. In verse 41, it says, they said to him, We are not born from sexual immorality. Other translations read, we are not illegitimate children like you, basically, is what they're referring to. They're referring to this scandal that had happened back in the day when, everybody knew that Mary was pregnant, and Mary and Joseph weren't even married yet, but yet Joseph did go ahead and marry her, and she gave birth to his son. And so they're referring back on this controversy, this scandal, and they say, we are of Abraham. We are legitimate children of God. Unlike, and so we could see that even down the road, this was sort of an issue for Jesus. He shrugs it off, as he does with a lot of other things, and says that they are of their father the devil, and things like that. But we know that God always has a plan, and he always works things out according to his will and his purposes. And yeah, this may have been a little blemish on the young family, Mary and Joseph, the young couple back in the day, and then Jesus would come along. But God worked it out for good. And so I want to thank you for stopping by for this 4th installment. Stay tuned for next time. Merry Christmas, and God bless.